Jake Paul versus Hasim Rahman Jr. Just when we were primed to see Jake Paul face Tommy Fury, the fight was canceled again. However, Paul will now fight Hasim Rahman Jr., son of former heavyweight champion Hasim Rahman, at Madison Square Garden in New York City on August 6th. The fact that Paul's new opponent is an active boxer rather than an aging retired athlete has many fans excited for an all-out brawl that could go either way. In this episode, we're going to analyze the history of this anticipated event, talk about the new Paul versus Hasim Rahman Jr. fight, and reveal some top sportsbook betting odds for the fight. Let's break down the craziness of what's shaping up to be a bout for the ages. Jake Paul versus Tommy Fury, the original bout. Paul was supposed to face Fury in December 2021 in Tampa, but Fury pulled out of the fight because of a supposed chest infection and a broken rib. So when Paul tweeted earlier this year that he was finally going to fight Tommy Fury in New York on August 6th, boxing fans and social media naturally erupted. However, the second attempt to organize fighting Fury was seemingly doomed from the start, with Fury's issues leading to the fight being canceled a second time. A press conference for the Madison Square Garden event was set to take place in New York on June 29th, but just a day before the event it was canceled due to Fury being denied U.S. entry. Fury posted an Instagram video explaining why he was denied entry into America, stating that Homeland Security pulled the fighter aside because his ESTA had been denied. Fury concluded the video by explaining that he's done absolutely nothing wrong and that he still has no clue why he's not allowed to travel to America. Betting on Jake Paul versus Hasim Rahman Jr. As disappointed as boxing fans may be at what's happened, we're hoping there's a stunning silver lining in store with Paul's new fight against Hasim Rahman Jr. As of now, the top-ranked sportsbook, Bovada, has Paul to beat Hasim Rahman Jr. by paying 225 betting odds, with the underdog getting a plus 183. Let's take a deeper look at what promises to be an epic fight to watch. Who is Jake Paul? No doubt you've heard of Jake Paul, who first rose to fame on social media before landing the role of Dirk Mann on the Disney Channel show Bizaardvark. The 25-year-old is the younger brother of fellow boxer and YouTube star Logan Paul. Nicknamed the Problem Child, his popularity initially launched on Vine, where he's had over 2 billion views. Shortly after, he infiltrated nearly all avenues of social media, especially YouTube. Before having to face Hasim Rahman Jr., Paul has steamrolled opponents and won all 5 of his matches in his fighting career, 4 of them coming via knockout, with a vicious KO of Tyron Woodley being the highlight. Who is Hasim Rahman Jr.? Paul will now be fighting Hasim Rahman Jr., who on paper is a bigger threat to Paul's undefeated 5-bout streak than Tommy Fury, but the sportsbooks like sportsbetting.ag seem to disagree. They've got Paul at 210 odds and Rahman Jr. at the underdog at plus 170. Hasim Rahman Jr. is a professional boxer and the son of former world heavyweight boxing champion Hasim Rahman. With over 100 amateur fights, Rahman Jr. made his professional boxing debut in 2017 and amassed 12 straight victories. Even in a recent loss to Mackenzie Morrison, Rahman Jr. looked dominant for most of the bout, until Morrison caught him with a combo, which ultimately led to a TKO. Unlike Tommy Fury, Hasim Rahman Jr. is a tested fighter, finishing many bouts in the first round and going the distance on 6 occasions. On paper, Hasim Rahman Jr. is the biggest threat yet in Jake Paul's career as a boxer. Jake Paul releases footage of heated Hasim Rahman Jr. confrontation. Paul recently released footage of an altercation between him and Hasim Rahman Jr. from 2 years ago, which occurred after a sparring session between the two. Paul released the video on Instagram, stating that he's wanted this fight ever since Rahman Jr. ran his big mouth to me 2 years ago in the gym. In the video, both Paul and Hasim Rahman Jr. are in a boxing ring when Rahman Jr. promises to knock out Paul, and the two talk smack to one another as others make sure a full-blown fight doesn't break out. In the Instagram post, Jake Paul claims that his brother and the New York State Athletic Commission didn't want him to take the fight with heavyweight Hasim Rahman Jr. because it was too much risk, though the fight will be at just the cruiserweight limit of 200 pounds. So if Hasim is the toughest opponent for Paul to date, why do sportsbooks like BetUS have Jake Paul as an even bigger favorite than when he was going to fight Tommy Fury? We'll find out later in this video. Jake Paul versus Hasim Rahman Jr. odds. Why Paul is the favorite. It can sometimes be obvious where a bookmaker sets the odds for a fight. BetOnline, for example, has Amanda Serrano favored at minus 2,400 against Brenda Karen Carbajal, plus 1,220 in the Paul versus Hasim Rahman Jr. undercard. The interim champion is such a huge underdog because Amanda Serrano's a much more experienced fighter, and Amanda tops Carbajal in every vital boxing statistic, including rounds fought, KO percentage, and overall record. On the other hand, betting odds can be a bit more up in the air, like BetOnline listing Jake as a minus 210 favorite in his fight against Hasim, plus 170. Once we take a closer look, though, it makes sense that Paul is favored over Rahman Jr. Like all of his opponents before, Paul handpicked Rahman Jr., and the two have sparred, so Paul clearly thinks he has the upper hand. Hasim Rahman Jr., who has fought between 215 and 269 pounds, also needs to cut some weight for the August 6th fight, which may be a factor. But the bottom line is, despite their respective opponents being of a different caliber, Paul's fighting technique certainly looks better in the lead-up to fighting Hasim Rahman Jr. Regardless of being the betting favorite, many fans and boxing pundits feel that this will mark the fight when Paul finally loses. Either way, it'll be Jake Paul's toughest test yet. Considering Paul's career in boxing has consisted of fighting retired athletes from other sports and other YouTube personalities. Now let's have a look at the best sports books to bet on Jake Paul versus Hasim Rahman Jr. Number 1. Bovada. This renowned betting site is often considered one of the best sports books found anywhere, which is why they made our top pick to bet on the August 6th fight. Currently, Bovada has Jake Paul at minus 225 and Hasim with odds of plus 183. Because the fight was just announced, none of the top sports books listed have announced any prop bet options for the New York event, though that will certainly change in the near future. Number 2. sportsbetting.ag. For nearly 20 years, sportsbetting.ag has been a go-to destination for sports fans, and they're a sort of online gambling one-stop shopping, poker room, esports, casino, and much more. Currently, this online bookmaker has Paul as the winning favorite at minus 210 and Hasim Rahman Jr. with underdog odds of plus 170. Number 3. BetUS. BetUS is a popular bookmaker for American bettors who primarily lay action on domestic sports or horse racing, with little to no options for international leagues. As of the time of this report, BetUS has the best odds for Hasim Rahman Jr. to win at plus 190, Paul minus 230. So if you're thinking of taking the underdog, this is a great place to sign up. Number 4. BetOnline. For over 18 years, BetOnline has been one of the best sports books for early lines and competitive betting odds. Like sportsbetting.ag, BetOnline has Paul to beat Hasim Rahman Jr. at minus 210, with the underdog being given odds of plus 170. And with that, we've reached the end of the video. Who do you think will win this exciting bout? Do tell us in the comments section. For more sporty videos, make sure you subscribe to our channel and also press that notification icon. We'll see you in the next one.